you want to be successful? Do you want to grow your business? Do you want to dominate the day? Then you're going to need big skip energy. All right, Jeff Bajorek, welcome back to the Big Skip Energy podcast, man. How we doing?
I should have worn my shirt that you sent me after my last one. Sorry about that. I'm doing well. Lots of things going on, lots of moving parts. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Yeah.
So 2024 is off to a good start for me. I feel like I've got a little bit of wind at my back and some new ideas kind of populating my head here.
New ideas are always good. So the last time you were on the show, you are a repeat offender. I like to bring back
as charged.
Yeah, yes, that's right. So it's been a couple of years though, since you've been on, and obviously a lot's happened since then. Let's start off with, I guess, update my listeners as far as what are some of the fun projects that you've been working on the last several months?
The last several months, I've had a couple of fractional sales leadership jobs.
Yep.
Taking some clients on, which has been fun. It's a blessing and a curse in some ways when they give you an email address at their domain. And then people want to know what your calendar availability is and can you jump into Slack or our Teams instance or whatever. And sometimes that provides some distractions because you want to be a part of the culture. You want to be a part of this magical thing that makes a company. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, but if I get involved in who brought what to the potluck, like I'm taking time away from another client.
Come on, Jeff, you bring the macaroni and cheese on Friday or what? Let's do it.
Fun fact. That is one thing I will not eat. There is a very short list of things that I will not eat. Macaroni and cheese is one of them. Childhood, I blame childhood trauma. I can dig into that with my therapist if I want, but I've just kind of separated it. And what I can tell you, here's what I can tell you is that last time I had macaroni and cheese, I was in Chicago. This was 2018, maybe 2017, maybe. I was downtown Chicago for a client, and we were at one of the nicest steakhouses I've ever eaten at. And the city was buzzing because the Cubs won the World Series that year. It was October, like it was the middle of the series, I think, actually. And there was this, let's just say the food was impeccable. If anybody makes a good mac and cheese, it would be the place. And it was like truffle mac and cheese, right? It was like bougie.
Oil to it, you can automatically charge $15 more. So, you know.
And I said, yeah, I'll try it. And I tried it and I was like, this is probably the best macaroni and cheese I will ever have. And I do not want it. And so I even put it to the test.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So anyway, when you want to get involved in the culture, you want to participate, you want to be a friend to the organization, you want to step in, play a role, it can be distracting. But what I learned about kind of lifting up the hood on some of these companies, getting involved in leadership team meetings, there's so much more to an effective sales organization than selling skills and org charts and process maps and closing questions.
Weird. There's actually people involved, isn't there?
The ultimate random occurrence, right? Humans. And I've got a couple of friends where, we share stories, horror stories, success stories, etc. And often one of the responses in that text thread is just the shoulder shrugging guy emoji. And the text after is just like #humans, right? I mean, it's the ultimate variable is a human being, and the same human being doesn't even show up the same way from day to day. So never a dull moment. So I've taken a lot of lessons from that, and just I'm thinking about how I interact with organizations differently. I'm thinking about how I coach people differently. Thinking about a lot of other factors in a lot of other ways.
So the fractional manager, CEO, that type of thing, I think is obviously, it's a fairly, I shouldn't say new concept, given that name's a fairly new concept, but
consulting is what it is.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it's interesting to see the dynamic inside a company when you are supposed to be completely neutral, right? It's hard to really connect with people and remain outside of that culture, but you have to do it in order to do your job effectively. I mean, I imagine that's a pretty strenuous challenge.
It is, and it's difficult from a scope creep aspect. It's difficult from a time management aspect. It's difficult from what's the word I'm looking for? It just escaped me. So from a scope creep, from a time management aspect, from an attention management aspect, that's the thing. So it's one thing to be a fractional manager. I have these things I have to do. I've got these meetings I need to attend. I have these tasks that I need to see through.
Right.
It's another thing to be a fractional leader. And this is what I think your audience will take a lot away from on this podcast is the idea that leadership doesn't have time boundaries on it.
Mm-hmm.
You need to sometimes, I've taken that call from a fired up sales rep at 7 p.m. before.
Yep.
Because they just got off a great call. They're a time zone or two behind. They got it. Like I've been that rep before. I want my manager to take my call.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be that can wait till our next one-on-one on Tuesday because I'm out of hours for this week. Or sales, I know what it takes to be an effective sales leader. I've had really good ones. I've had less than good ones. They sure tried hard though. And the difference was palpable. Did they roll up their sleeves and get to work with you? That's how I know a good one. And I want to be that guy. But the challenge for me has been, how do I shift my thinking? How do I be proactively creative with one client? And then in the very next moment, proactively creative with another. It's very difficult to do.
Almost like you have to be highly adaptable, which leads us to another topic I want to bring up. Do you like that segue I just did there?
Whoa, pro level. You got? Do you have a read? Do you have an ad read you need to do at that one? That was smooth.
Every now and then I can pull something out. So adaptability is something that I want to talk to you about today. Kind of like we talked just briefly before we started recording. And the reason for that is because my listeners are primarily in the mortgage, banking, and real estate space. And coming off of last year where we had, let's face it, we had a crap year. Everybody did. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with saying that. I don't think if you tell everybody that it was a bad year in those industries that you're being a negative Nelly or whatever, it's just the reality of the situation. It's fine. However, we are on our way out. That said, the tools that people used before the downside last year are not going to be the same as they're going to have going forward. And the market's going to be very different. In other words, they're going to have to adapt. And so what are you seeing out there as some of the best ways, if you're a salesperson, to adapt to changing conditions when you may know some of what's going to change, but you may not be prepared for everything that's going to change? Talk to me about that a little bit.
I think you need to trust yourself.
Okay.
First and foremost, you need to trust yourself. You need to trust yourself that you can adapt. Let's go back to COVID. I mean, let's not actually go back to COVID, but let's go back to the beginning of 2020 when I worked with a lot of people who were in the field, face-to-face sellers, doing dinner, shaking hands, buying concert tickets, things like that. All of a sudden it was, well, I can't get face-to-face with my customers in person. I can't sell. Oh, wait a second here. Why not?
Yeah.
Is your corporate expense account the only reason you could get a meeting? And is you picking up the check? Is that the only reason you made someone feel bad that they needed to do something with you? Let's think about what you really.
Maybe I should try guilt.
Yeah. But this law of reciprocity gets abused all the time.
Sure.
Like I get it. I've read the book. It's there. Influence Cialdini. I'll put my little AMA citation at the bottom. But let's not give it more credit than it's due. You still have a message to convey. You still have body language you can read over Zoom. We will never replace the magic of the energy exchange between two people in the same place at the same time. And that, as a side note, we can put this bullet point somewhere else. I think that's why AI will never actually replace us. For as long as humans are buying from something, there will be magic to buying it from another human. But in that moment, we had to adapt. In that moment, we had to stop. We had to trust ourselves that we could get the job done. We had to go back to the drawing board. We needed to think about what getting the job done looked like. And then we had to come up with a new way to execute against it. And I talk a lot about the fact that selling is both an art and a science. The science of selling are the things that need to be done. These are the steps that need to be executed in order for a sale to be made. But the art of selling comes in how you execute. Let's go to the tried and true argument of using the phone versus using email. The phone is dead. Long live the phone. Whatever. Speak which, my phone is literally ringing as I said that, which is funny. But the long live the phone is dead, whatever. I don't care how you do it. That part's up to you. But that it gets done is what to make sure it happens, right? That the science needs to be carried out. The art is how you carry it out. So trusting that you can get a job done is the first key to adaptability, right? Trusting that you can do the job. The second key is knowing what the job is to be done. That's important, right? And then I go back to the sales process. There's only 4 steps. Identify who you can help, get their attention, communicate your value, ask for next steps. That's it, right? Like let's break this down simply. And now let's remind ourselves of what needs to happen. And I think when people become flat-footed, when they get caught on their heels, when they're not adaptable, is when they get too married to a method and not looking at an outcome instead, right? We need to work backward from outcomes, not get so entrenched in a routine that it becomes a rut, that it becomes a canyon, that it becomes something that you can't extract yourself from. And so it's the idea of knowing what needs to be done rather than being fixated on how to do anything. That's a big component of it. And the last thing is something I talk about a lot, which is keep your head where your feet are. Make sure you're present in the moment so that you are identifying opportunities, whether it's a seismic shift in the market or just a smaller shift in a conversation that you're having. Make sure you don't get so carried away with talk tracks or scripts or routines that you can't read the other person in the conversation.
Yeah.
I was talking about this and I realized I've been talking for a couple of minutes here, so I'm going to let you introduce.
Hey, that's why I have you on, so you talk.
I'll tell you what, man, as a sales guy, to talk this podcast have always been crazy for me because as a sales guy, I'm not used to talking this much, which sounds weird for my mom to hear, right? But, the idea that you should be listening way more often than you're talking is well ingrained in me. So to just kind of rant like this it's kind of nice, but I'm self-conscious too.
Safe space, Jeff. Don't be self-conscious.
But, I was talking about this with a client just recently, a couple of weeks ago, maybe. And we reviewed a call together on one of our coaching calls. We reviewed a call and there was a moment in time where he asked a discovery question. The prospect answered him, gave him an opportunity, but it wasn't a clear opportunity. And he moved on to the next discovery question. And I said, hold on, time out. We don't need to listen any further to this call right now. You missed an opportunity there. And here's what you could have learned instead. And what he could have learned instead, what the opportunity was to go a little deeper. She gave him an answer to a question that if he were in the moment, he would have probed a little bit deeper. Not because there was so much to learn from what she said, but because it's valuable to acknowledge a vulnerable answer. So you give me a vulnerable answer on a discovery call, Skip, I'm going to at least acknowledge that, maybe dig a little deeper, maybe give you some kind of comment that lets you know, wow, that must have been really tough. I'm sorry to hear that. Or, wow, that's a really interesting challenge. I've never heard of that before. I wonder how you might solve that in the future. Whatever. It just needs to be some sort of acknowledgement to a real answer. Yeah. Because when they give you a real answer and they open themselves up and you skip and you go to the next discovery question on your list, they know you're not paying attention to them.
Yep.
And you've broken the connection between you and your prospect. And without a connection, you can't create any tension. Without attention, you can't make, without tension, you cannot make a sale.
Yep.
So it's these little things where, again, adaptability. When you're so stuck in a routine, when you know that these are the 7 questions you have to ask on a discovery call, you only have 30 minutes for this call. You got to get them all done. You got to learn these things so that you can, move on and hopefully twist their arm into some pitch with a 20% discount before the end of the quarter. You're smiling like you've been there, you at home listening, right? Like there's that aspect of things that is somewhat repeatable, somewhat scalable, somewhat forecastable. And there's good things to take away from that.
Sure.
But the opposite of this is there's a human being on the other end of the line. There's a human being that just opened themselves up a little bit, just offered an opportunity for you to gain some insights, just offered an opportunity for you to build a stronger connection, to create more tension, to make a bigger sale. Or maybe if you can't make a bigger sale, maybe you can make such an impression, such an impact that they tell their friends about you.
Yeah, imagine that.
And maybe instead of making a customer for a sale, you make a customer for life.
Right.
And there's just a different trajectory, even though sometimes it feels like you're slowing down. Jeff, what happens if I don't get through all 7 of my questions in 30 minutes?
Doesn't matter. You've hit a possible jackpot.
Sounds to me like you might have earned another 30
Really
minute
help
call.
somebody. Well, so yeah, exactly. You might have some more time in the future.
Do another one. It's
Let's
really
not
okay.
get slave to our systems.
But I love the way that you said that too. You're a slave to your systems. Your systems are methods. They're methods that achieve outcomes. If we're stuck in the systems and we lose sight of the outcomes, that's when we become slaves to our jobs. That's when they become less fulfilling. That's when they become less inspiring. That's when you become unadaptable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And-
See, that's the part that AI could eventually replace is all that crap, right? But it can't. Well, the system part.
No, I'm with you.
But the connection is just not there. There's a reason. Now, granted, I know this is archaic. But there's a reason people say representative on the phone every time. They don't want to deal with the smart system on the other end. They want to talk to a person for a reason.
Right. I try to get to that as quickly as possible. Do I press 1, 0, or it's 8 now? Every once in a while, it's 8. They throw you a curveball. 0 just takes you back to the beginning of the menu.
So I give a talk on being adaptable, and one of the things that I bring up a lot of times is the experience paradox, and that is something that basically says, hey, the more experienced you are in any given field, the less likely or the harder time you have to change and adapt, because you have so much prior that affects you, and you have ingrained systems and habits and this kind of thing.
Like steering the Titanic, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my giant Lego Titanic back there. But yeah, so I think that's part of it. But at the same time, that's not an excuse. And there are things that people can do to, once they've acknowledged that and they recognize that, they can do to try and essentially unlearn what they've learned as far as sticking to your guns and being in cruise control. Let's be honest, right? So other than what you just mentioned, what are some other tips? If you're a seasoned salesperson or just a professional in general, being adaptable is key. But what are some of the best methods you've seen people use to become adaptable besides what you just talked about, of course?
Couple of things that I want to say that'll lead to my answer.
Okay.
The first thing is, just because you're not adaptable, it's an old dog, new tricks paradigm, right? Mm-hmm. Just because you're not adaptable doesn't mean that adaptability isn't required. It's not about you.
That's right.
That's what you need to remember. Rule number 1. The next thing, the thing that I would suggest, and I think I've done this pretty well. I don't want to give myself too much credit. But be curious about what is working. And that comes from...
I'll give you Ted Lasso there for a second.
That comes from understanding that you don't know it all. Mm-hmm. Understanding that there's a lot of stuff that just because it's different from you doesn't mean that it doesn't work.
Right.
Drink what you like what you drink. That's what I say. I mean, you want to put ice in your red wine at dinner, like rock on, long as you enjoy it. I don't care. I'm not going to be a snob around that. I may raise an eyebrow, I may start a conversation, but maybe that's what you were hoping for. I don't know. Okay.
How do you do that?
It's enlighten me. Maybe I'll try it. Right. But I think that the key to curiosity is admitting that you might be wrong. You can't be curious unless you're willing to be wrong. Mm-hmm. And so realizing that it's not all about you, realizing that you could be wrong, and then looking for inspiration from that curiosity. I play golf with people who are younger than me. I got a couple of guys that go on this golf trip with me that are 15 years younger than me.
Yeah.
Maybe not 15 years. They're good 10 years younger than me. Mm-hmm. And the words that they use and the slang terms that they throw around and everything, I giggle. I mean, it's just kind of fun. And it's like a completely different way to look at the world. Mm-hmm. I've got 2 teenagers now. Yeah. And the way they talk and the way they interact with their friends and words that they say, again, like
makes you feel old, man.
Well, it does make it. Well, okay. So here's the thing: you can pity yourself and feel old. I mean, which it's true. But how do you want to look at it? You want to feel old, or do you just want to be inspired by the next generation?
Yeah.
Or do you just want to be? Do you want to just have fun with a little bit of creativity? And my kids talk about rizzing people up, and Riz is short for charisma, right? Yeah. I'm like, okay, I see where that goes, and I see how you got to this slang and whatever. And you really use it like that? And And the funny thing is, now I have the role as a dad. I can use these words totally out of context on purpose and make my kids double over on the floor laughing, which just makes me feel good too, right?
Yeah.
And so you look at all this stuff. If I was going to be a stodgy old timer an old dog who couldn't be taught new tricks, I wouldn't be having any fun. I wouldn't be learning anything, and I wouldn't be able to, here you go, maintain my adaptability in a changing environment. Because
There
you
you
know
go.
what? Here's the thing. My kids are teenagers. They're 14 and they're almost 15 and almost 13. They're going to enter the workforce in a time when I'm going to be leading workforces.
Mm-hmm.
And look, in 10 years, I'll be in my mid-50s. If I'm disregarding what my kids are talking about right now, I won't be able to relate to the team that I need to go to bat for me in 10 years.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, you can't discount it. You just can't.
No.
That's one of the things that actually, along the same lines I mentioned a minute ago with the experience paradox. That's one of the things that like you've got the seasoned professional, you've got the young professional. And a lot of times, ones that are really, frankly, crotchety old men, kind of like you said, they a lot of times it's like, oh, you can't teach me anything. Something like, it's the old time cliche, right?
Right.
When they can sure as hell teach you how to be more adaptable because they don't have all that baggage that they're carrying around with them. So you know what? They're going to be able to change those dimes. So maybe you could learn at least that from them. Right?
Well, if I sit down with a 25-year-old seller who does it differently than me, does it on TikTok or whatever, slides into someone's DMs. I don't know. Do the kids even say that anymore?
No, I think it's like 5 years ago, man.
Might be. See, it's even changing as quickly as we can think about it and reference it. If I ask them, why'd you do it that way? And I've earned the right to get an answer. Maybe I've got the credibility to where I can probe a little deeper and say, okay, no, I get that that's what you did. And I get that that's how it worked. I said, but why do you think that worked? Why do you think that works better than the phone? Why do you think that works better than sending cold email? Let's talk about this. Well, here's the thing, Skip, I might learn something.
Absolutely.
And you know what? They might learn something too. And to see myself in this position as a leader too, to where I say, well, okay, you answering that question of why you think it works is an exercise for you more than it's an exercise for me. I'm asking that question, having a pretty good idea, at least a good hypothesis. And if we're right on, if our hypotheses are the same, well, then we've just connected, which is a win. If our hypotheses are different, well, now we have something to talk about.
Yep.
And we're both going to get better as a result of that conversation. And like, who loses in that situation? Nobody.
Well, it's kind of like Anthony Iannarino's one-up strategy or concept.
Yeah.
It's like, just because you may be one up on them about topic one, they're going to be one. That dynamic is when you come together. That's when something happens.
Right. And I've talked to Anthony about this, and he's expressed too that, yeah, you're one up, but in such a way that you're always looking for how they're one up as well.
Exactly.
It's
when
it's a paradox in its own. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. If you realize that the whole situation is bigger than you, if you can maintain your own curiosity, and if you can just find a way to have fun with it, then everybody's going to be more adaptable. You're learning along the way. It's tough. If you're in your late 50s, early 60s right now, and you're listening to this, you're rolling your eyes. I can't believe you made it 25 minutes. You're rolling your eyes. Or you've made it 25 minutes because there's something in you that's like, maybe Skip's got a point. I'm not sure about this Bajorek guy, but Skip's interjecting at the right places. And maybe there is something that I can do a little bit differently. And maybe these last 5, 6, 10 years of my career there's still an opportunity for me to take another step. I'm tired. My routines work for me because they have. I'm not sure. And here's the thing. There are a lot of people. There's at least a couple dozen people right now in this moment listening right now that are saying, I've come a long way. I only have a few years left. It doesn't feel like it's enough time to adapt, but it's going to be tough doing it the way that I've been doing it for the last 3 decades.
Yeah.
And they're stuck. You don't need to be stuck. You just need to be curious. And the change part, the adaptability part, it's not as hard as you think. And if you're doing it right, I think you can have a lot of fun at the same time. So I get that it's scary. I get that it feels hard, but there's something to be said about just showing up and starting.
But we have to embrace it. So, all right, Jeff, before we close, I'm going to shift gears completely to a different topic here. All right.
All right.
Yeah, gotta be nimble and adapt, right? Yeah.
I'm a little frightened.
No, it's good. Be right up your alley. So you churn out some really deep, thoughtful content on
Thank you.
LinkedIn every week. All right.
Mhm.
One more than that, but you know what I mean. Your big release is every Sunday,
Every
right?
Sunday morning. Yep.
Sunday morning. Yep. And so I work with a lot of originators and realtors and so on and so forth, sales professionals, let's call it, that struggle with what to post, right? And I know we're not going to go into a social media training thing here, but
Sure.
where do you get your inspiration for what you are able to produce weekly at that level
My conversations with people
during the
during the
previous
week,
week?
normally, it really does serve me to get a couple weeks ahead. And there are times when I can do that.
Oh, sure, sure.
But I have 3 great stories to tell, or I'm reminded of them. It's interesting though. I mean, I had a flurry of stories and I do video now because it's just easier to tell a story in
Mhm.
video. But, you know, I had a conversation with a young rep who was working for a client, and there was a really interesting relationship there in that I was training him, I was leading him in that role, but I was also mentoring him because he just reminded me a ton of myself at that
Mhm.
age with just a ton of great questions, like got it, but didn't understand what I didn't get and everything.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of momentum to steer in that regard. And I just remember breaking into a story about something that like to me was so irrelevant. I was concerned that maybe like I never would think to tell this story. That's the moral of it here is I never
Yeah.
would think to tell this story there'd be any value of it. But because of the context in the conversation, I just went there and he's like, wow, that was impactful. And literally I broke the conversation. I was like, really? Like, I mean, I thought it was a cool story. I mean, it kind of related to the
Mhm.
question you just asked me. So it felt like a decent response, but he's like, no, what a great real world story from way out of left field that just kind of illustrates that there are lessons to be learned everywhere. I'm like,
Yep.
huh, okay. And
Yeah.
so that shifted my own mind around stories to tell.
Mhm.
And so I'm going back and having conversations with my mentor and remembering things that he said that knocked me off my knocked me on my seat back in the day that how do I remember they're so memorable. How do I distill them into something that might be valuable today? And
Right.
it's a completely different way to think about content creation. I think
Mm.
we all follow people and we all fall into these modes where it feels like we got to be like them.
Mhm.
Nobody creates like Anthony Iannarino.
Yep.
I've joked with him for years that we have similar brains on similar wavelengths. He just uses his much better than I do. And he's just so thoughtful and so cerebral and so intelligent at assimilating these concepts. I never feel like I'm out of place with him when I'm talking to him. But for me to create as prolifically as he does in the way that he does, no chance. It's not happening. But you know
Mhm.
what? For a couple of years, I tried to do that. And it wasn't working, and then I got frustrated by it, which then just kind of disincentivized me to continue doing it. So, I have a trademark that's sell like you,
I was just
and
about to say, almost like you should sell like
but, the genesis of that and the understanding of that is it gets back to that the idea of science and art and process and methods. The
Mhm.
process needs to get completed, but you can do it any way you want. So we have these guardrails, these frameworks to work within. But man, fill that appointment book however you want. Smoke signals, carrier pigeons, social media, telephone calls, knocking on doors,
Oh,
doesn't
who
matter.
cares? Yeah.
Doesn't matter. The content creation is the same. You want to get on TikTok. Don't be afraid of it.
Yeah.
If it makes sense for you, then get there. If you want to you want to hit it up on LinkedIn all the time and be a thought leader, then go right ahead and do that. But what I will say about any content creation scheme or plan,
Scheme.
I'm a better salesman because of my writing. And it's not because I read what I write afterwards. That's not a backhanded pitch.
Mhm.
It's the idea that I have to sit down, formulate a clear thought, defend it about 1,000 times in my head
Yeah.
before I hit send. And then once it's out there, I'm ready to actually defend it.
Yeah.
And because of that forced clarity, before anybody reads it, I'm
Mhm.
instantly better. And so when you realize that content creation is for you, not for everybody else, it's a different perspective. It's a different approach. And I'll go back to Seth Godin and Stephen Pressfield. And Seth Godin says that the thing about art is that when you get ready to ship it or publish it or whatever it is, you have to be willing to say, this might not work. Otherwise, it's not your best work. And then what Pressfield says is put your ass where your heart wants it to be. And so get in that chair and do that work every day.
Yep. There's always the hustle component to it.
Every time.
All right, man. Last thing. Tell me about your statues you got back there. You got the Rodin thinker. I see a monkey. You got something behind your head. I can't
It's not a monkey.
What is that? I can't tell.
I will share it with you. I will share it with you. All right. If your audience who's listening right now will go to YouTube or wherever this is online.
Yeah, it'll be on
All
YouTube. Right. Sweet.
Stories to tell. Okay. So this statue, okay, we'll just call it a statue for right now, was a totem for my dad's bowling team when he was in his late teens, early 20s. It was my dad, two of his brothers, and my grandpa. And that became their mascot. Mm-hmm. And then not too long afterward, it was passed along from every high school graduate in the family to the next one. And the idea was you had to take this statue with you and you had to place it in your dorm or wherever you were living in a prominent place so that it could be seen. I graduated at the same time with two cousins. So I only got the thing for like 6 months, but fortunately I got it first. This is a picture that your audience will not be able to see, but this is me at age 17 receiving said trophy at the graduation party.
I like it. Now that is a picture for the ages right there.
It's a classic.
That's right.
Now, if you're following along, you will know that I have a statue in my hand, but this statue needed to be passed around to actually in this case, it went to my brother, who was the next one to graduate, and then was passed on from him. I actually don't know where it is right now, but it is in someone's dorm, I can tell you.
Very good.
About 10 years ago, maybe a little more than that. I was on a walk one night and I was like, I wonder if I can buy another one.
Yeah.
That thing was pretty cool. So I Googled, and if you're looking at home, there is this hideous looking creature holding a gigantic beer that says happiness is a cold beer free.
Yeah.
And it's mirrored on the screen, but happiness is a cold beer free. And so I Googled happiness is a cold beer free statue. And I come up with eBay and there is one pair of these statues. Now, this is a creature of a female form.
Yes, indeed.
The pair that came with it is a male. And his beer says, my love is a beer. So think bowling trophy, think freshman year of college. It tracks. Not so much for me anymore. I don't have that kind of a love affair with beer, but this male formed statue was, I think they're people, but this male statue was a bonus. What's really interesting and makes me really proud right now is that if you Google you do that same Google search, you won't find any. So as far as I'm concerned, these are the last two. This is the last remaining pair intact on the planet. And
the Smithsonian will be calling soon for those.
Yes. Most people don't actually savvy what's going on behind me here, Skip. So thanks for asking.
I have never been so glad I asked a random
story.
In my life. That's
totally
amazing.
Random question. Your podcast listeners are dying right now. They're like, give me a break. Can we just skip? Isn't Jeb Blunt next week or something? You know.
All right, man. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate the time today. Great stuff as always. And man, can't wait to talk to you again for the trifecta here. In another year or two, we'll get the trilogy complete.
Always good to catch up, Skip. Thanks, man.
All right, bud. Have a good one.